elements and processes of communication. Yung ating lesson 1. Okay, 15 items, short 15 items lang naman siya na quiz about the nature of communication because this afternoon we'll be discussing a new lesson. This is lesson 2 from our syllabus and that is the intercultural communication. Okay? So if we say intercultural communication, so this is basically our lesson 2 already. So medyo marami pa tayong hahabulin ng mga lesson. Okay? Bago ang midterm. Wala pa tayo sa kalahati actually. Okay? So we'll be discussing on intercultural communication. O ito namang iba ay papasok pa lang. Okay? Now, ayan, salita na ako, mag-admit pa ako. Ayan, meron pa ulit. Oh. Okay. So we'll be discussing on intercultural communication. So perhaps the most important word under the intercultural communication is cultural. Okay? Or simply culture. Or if we say, or another could be inter. So meaning to say inter, meaning outside. Or simply if we say inter outside and then culture. So if we say intercultural communication, it simply means that this is a type of communication in which we are communicating to other people or other social group even though we are different in culture. That is intercultural communication. Or yan ay pakikipagkomunikasyon sa tao na hindi ka pareho or hindi katulad ng kultura mo or ng culture mo or ng religion mo, ng language mo, etc. Okay, that's intercultural communication. Now, first let us define what intercultural communication is. Sabi dito, intercultural communication is a discipline that studies communication across different cultures and social groups or how culture affects communication. Last time, if you could remember, we mentioned that one of the barriers of communication is culture. And we call that one as cultural barrier. Am I right? That sometimes communication is unsuccessful or communication falters. Communication is interfered because of culture. That will result into what we call cultural barrier. But intercultural communication is telling us that despite the so many differences, despite the diversity of one's culture, we should and we shall communicate. So ibig sabihin, is it possible that communication or successful communication takes place even if the culture of the communicators involved are different? I repeat, is communication still possible even if the culture of the communicators are different? Shireen. Posible pa rin ba na mag-take place ang communication kahit yung people na involved there ay magkaiba sila ng culture? Sabi ni Shireen, no sir. Okay? How about the others? Other opinion? Yes, Jessica. Sabi niya, yes po. Okay? Yes, Loke.
Sir, yes po. Dito na po pumapasok yung adaptation po.
Okay. So basically, it's still possible. Okay? And that is what intercultural communication is telling us. That culture or communication should not be exclusive to those people who share the same language, who share the same culture, who share the same gender, who share the same educational background, who share the same social group. But rather, it must be intercultural. Ibig sabihin nun, we have to communicate with other people despite of the differences, despite of the so many diversities that we have. And that is where intercultural communication takes place. Ang intercultural communication, ito ay klase ng komunikasyon na kung saan dapat daw ay makipag-communicate tayo sa mga hindi natin kapareho ang kultura. Okay? Hindi natin kapareho ng wika, hindi natin kapareho ng social group or ng religion, ng gender, etc. And that is basically the trend nowadays. We are now in the 21st century. And especially we Filipinos, we are workers around the world, right? We are workers around the globe. So ang Pilipino, kahit sa ang dako ng mundo, may Pilipino. So kailangan niyang matutunan itong intercultural communication, kailangan niyang ma-adapt, kailangan niyang ma-learn, kailangan niyang ma-imbibe yung culture ng country na kanyang pupuntahan so that he would not be left behind. Okay? So more so, there are actually goals of communication or intercultural communication. Kindly read Joshua, what are the goals of intercultural communication? Matthew. Okay, so intercultural communication highlights four important goals. There are actually four important goals of IC or intercultural communication. First is that recognition and respect of one's culture. Okay? In intercultural communication, so that communication is possible interculturally, we have to recognize that culture is different and we have to respect also that culture is different. Remember people, respect begets respect. That if you want that your culture be respected of another people, then you also have to respect their culture in return. Second, aside from recognition and respect, another goal is that mutual adaptation. If we say adaptation, meaning to say learning, understanding others' culture, the culture of another individual. Adapt it. Ibig sabihin ng adapt, use it. Okay? Take it. Use it. Take it as your own. Use it as your own so that you will be able to make adaptation. Another is that promotion of the development of cultural sensitivity, meaning we have to be very sensitive with other culture. Okay? Remember people that no culture is superior than the other and no culture is inferior than the other. No culture is more powerful than another culture. No culture is weak or weaker than the other culture. Culture is just the same. Culture is just equal. Culture is just fair. And we have to promote cultural sensitivity. We have to promote that despite the differences of one's culture, despite the so many diversities in our culture, communication should still be possible. That is, to respect one's culture, adapt one's culture, promote others' culture, and lastly, understand the culture of others. Because basically, we can communication will falter. Communication will become unsuccessful if we do not know how to respect and understand another individual. Actually, the culture of another person. Actually, hindi magiging successful or we can never become competent or communicative competent if we do not know how to respect and understand other culture. Kaya nga sabi ko kanina, no culture is exclusive. No culture is superior than the other culture. Your culture, if you want that your culture be respected by another, you have to respect also their culture so that mutual understanding is achieved between the sender and the receiver. Okay? So, here are of course culture. Ano ba ang kultura? Ano ba ang culture? Remember people that culture refers to our belief system, refers to our norms, refers to our values, refers to our language, refers to our religion, refers to our perception, refers to our views in life. That is culture. And remember also that culture is set by the society. Okay po? Sino bang nagsiset ng kultura nung ating,
Mga ninuno po.
okay, mga ninuno? Okay, that's right. Culture is basically, it is set by our society. That is, a culture is a standard that is prescribed, that is permissible, that is set by our society. Okay? So, it means that if this culture is not followed, then basically, it means that you could be an outcast, right? Or it would be, you could be incorrect, or you may be wrong, you may be regarded as bad, or it may be unethical because you are not following the culture. Okay? More so, culture has its own characteristics. And there are 8 important characteristics of culture. Number 1, it says there, culture is learned. So nasabi na natin yan kanina, ang kultura ay napag-aaralan. Okay? So imagine, yung isang Pinay, nagpunta siya sa ibang bansa. Sabi nga natin, punta sa ibang bansa, of course, dala-dala niya yung Pinoy na kultura, pero pagdating niya doon, of course, kailangan niyang i-embrace, kailangan niyang i-adopt yung bagong culture. Kasi, in order for her to survive, she needs to adopt, she needs to embrace that new culture. And that is, culture is learned. Napag-aaralan po ang kultura. Second, culture is shared by a group of people. So it means to say that our culture, since this is a standard that is set by the society, then it is shared by same group of people. So meaning to say, for example, social group 1, they have their own culture. Social group 2 has also another culture. Okay? And culture is different. Culture is diverse from one social group to another social group. Another, culture is cumulative. Ito yung sinabi kanina ng isa niyong kaklase na ang kultura ay it is passed on from generation to generation. Na ipapasa yung culture, na ipapamana, that's the right term, na ipapasa at na ipapamana ang isang kultura. Okay? Next, number 4, culture changes. Nagbabago ang culture. That means to say that the culture which is true in the past may no longer be the culture that is applicable at present. There has been culture that has been eradicated. There has been culture which are no longer practiced at present, and they have already been changed by new ones. Remember, people, that if culture is changing, if culture is evolving, it means to say that culture is alive. Kasi kapag ang kultura ay hindi na ito nagbago, hindi na ito nag-flourish, hindi na ito naging productive, ibig sabihin, patay na yung culture na yon. But if there is continuity, if there is continuous change or continuous evolution of culture, then culture is alive. Okay? Buhay ang kultura kung ito ay patuloy na nababawasan at patuloy na nadadagdagan. Okay, next. Another important point is we have number 5, culture is dynamic. So if we say dynamic, it means to say that culture is not permanent. Meaning to say, permanent is dynamic. It is subject to continuous change. Patuloy itong nagbabago. Patuloy itong nadadagdagan, nababawasan, napapalitan, and it is constantly modified and discarded. Okay? Depending on the need of the generation or the need of the present time. And number 6, it says also here that culture is ideational. So if we say ideational, it means to say that culture is a pattern of behavior which the members of the society are expected to follow. So ibig sabihin, this is the culture. You have to follow it. Because if you do not follow it, then you are an outcast. This is the culture. If you do not follow it, then you are unethical. This is the culture. If you go against the culture, then you are bad. You are wrong. Okay? You are unethical. Therefore, whatever would be the culture is, if you want to be good, if you want to be ethical, if you want to be something that is correct, if you want to become humane, then you have to follow the culture. Okay? That is ideational. Another, culture is diverse. Pag sinasabi po nating diverse, nag-iiba-iba ang kultura. There is what we call different ang ating culture. There is what we call this cultural differences. No culture, no two culture is alike. They are different. Magkakaiba ito. Yung paniniwala ng isang grupong ito, iba sa paniniwala ng ibang grupo. What is true to social group A may not be true to social group B. And what is true to social group B may not be true to social group A. That's why culture is diverse. Okay? And lastly, culture is a range of permissible behavior. It means to say that how we view culture, since culture is viewed differently, how we interpret culture is also viewed differently. So meaning to say, since ang kultura ay iba-iba, yung paano natin i-view, paano natin ini-interpret, paano natin inuunawa yung isang culture ay nag-iiba-iba din. Okay? Ayan. That's why, because of this diversity, because of this complexity of culture, we have to arrive at what we call intercultural communication. Napaka-complex ng kultura. Okay? Kaya, if we will not embrace this diversity, these differences of the so many differences that we have, communication will falter. Communication will become unsuccessful. And that is brought by cultural barrier. Kaya nga ngayon, dapat ini-eliminate na natin yan. Dapat ini-eradicate na natin yan. Dapat tinatanggal na natin na ang kultura ay sagabal sa komunikasyon. Dapat ang view natin ngayon is that it must be intercultural communication. That despite that we are different in culture, despite that we are diverse in culture, despite that we are different in religion, we are different in gender, we are not similar in views and perspective, we can still communicate. We can still share messages. We can still share mutual understanding. We can still become peaceful. We can still be united despite of the so many differences. Okay? Ayan. And there are actually 4 important components of culture. And one of which is communication. And that is what we are focusing at present. Intercultural communication. Now question, how does culture affect communication? How does culture affect communication? Lawrence.
Pwede Tagalog, sir?
Yes, kahit Tagalog. Sige. Intercultural tayo.
Naapektuhan po ng kultura yung communication, yung paraan ng pakikipagsalamuha nila sa bawat tao. Yun lang po.
Okay? Oh, sige. Makaranas?
Ano sir, naapektuhan yung culture sa communication through its language, sir. Yung ginagamit na language.
Okay, that could be one. Very good. What else? Aside from the language, what else? Ano pa? May we have Alan James. How does culture affect communication? Makaranas already mentioned one. That is through the language. What else?
In terms of ano po, vocabulary na ano,
Vocabulary?
yeah.
Okay. Oh. Aside from language, another component of culture is as regards communication is symbols. Remember people that even our non-verbal actions are basically part of our culture. Okay? So, as regards communication, as a component of intercultural communication or a component of culture, language is one and another is symbol. If we say language, language particularly refers to the words that we are using in verbal communication. Because sabi nga natin, if we communicate, we use verbal or non-verbal. We can communicate through verbal, and that is the use of language, or that is the use of words. Or we can also communicate through symbols, or that is non-verbal communication, or through our gestures, our body language, our facial expressions, okay, our hand movements. Yeah, those are basically symbols. Remember, that is non-verbal. So either verbal or non-verbal, that is dictated or that is a set standard by our culture. Okay po? Paano tayo makapag-communicate? Verbal man yan or non-verbal man yan, yaan ay sinisimbolo nito or ipinapakita nito yung kultura ng isang tao. Now, language. How do we use language? If you communicate, how will you use language? How will you manipulate the power of language? What are the two essential components of language use? Saan natin dinedepende yung paggamit natin ng language? Yes, Virtudes.
Ano po, it depends on the situation po and the people you yung sa kinakausap mo, sir. Depende sa kausapan sa setting po ng
Okay, so that's right. So language use is dependent or it's fully dependent on two important factors. One is the person you're talking to or the person is spoken to or yung kinakausap natin. At ang pangalawa, the setting or the context where the communication takes place. So these are the two important things that you have to remember as regards language use. Ang paggamit po natin ng language, naaayon ito sa dalawa. Yung kinakausap natin at yung saan nagaganap ang pag-uusap. For example, language has different varieties. Maraming iba't ibang variety ang wika. We have balbal or you have your slang, you have your colloquial, you have your jargon, you have your formal, you have your dialect, you have your sociolect, you have your ethnolect. All of these are varieties of language. Okay? For example, kapag ikaw ay nakikipag-inuman sa kanto or sa kalye, alangan namang formal na wika ang gagamitin mo. Kundi ang gagamitin mo ay salitang balbal or slang ang tawag natin doon. Or yung ating mababang uri ng wika, yung salitang kanto, salitang kalye. Okay? But kapag nag-apply ka ng trabaho and pinatawag ka for a job interview, definitely you will not use slang. You will not use balbal. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin doon sa employer mo na mag-i-interview sa'yo na, pre, ang sagot ko dyan, pre, ay ganito, pre. Okay? Kasi nga, the context is different. The setting is different. Therefore, there must be a shift on the language. So, sinasabi lang sa atin ng language as component of culture is that you have to use the language based or depending on the person you're talking to and or person is spoken to and the setting or the context where that communication takes place. Okay? Kasi kung nakikipag-inuman ka sa kanto at nag-English ka pa doon at gumamit ka ng formal na wika, baka basagin yung bote ng alak sa harap mo. Right? Pero kapag nakipag-inuman ka sa kanto at ginagamit mo yung salita na pangkanto o yung salitang akma doon sa sitwasyon or salitang akma doon sa lugar, then definitely communication will become successful. Okay? Another is what we call symbols. If we say symbols, we are referring to your non-verbal. Okay, we are referring to your gestures. We're referring to your hand movements. your facial expression. Sa Pilipinas, kapag in the Philippines, one way to show respect is sometimes we kiss the hand of our elders, of the elders, or sometimes nagmamano tayo, right? But if you go to Arab countries or you go to Saudi Arabia, you hold the hand of an elderly or you hold the hand of a person, that would already mean different, right? In the Philippines, sometimes if matagal na nating hindi nakita yung ating kaibigan or ng ating kakilala, we do beso-beso. We do hug, right? Just to show that we miss that person. But in other countries, beso-beso or hugging may be interpreted differently. Okay, that is symbol. Sometimes in the Philippines, we say if we nod, taas baba, it would be say yes. Pag left to right, it would be say no. But in other countries, that would be different. The interpretation of that would be different. That is symbols in terms of language. That's why ito siya. That's why in the future, you will become a computer scientist. You become computer engineers. You become you will become computer experts. And of course, you are also dreaming to work abroad, right? You're also dreaming to work outside of the Philippines for a better or for a greener pasture. So it is important that you must learn and adopt the culture of that country that you'll be working with so that you will not be left behind, or so that you'll be able to address the different barriers or the different cultural barriers para at least maging easy ka, maging comfortable ka, maging successful yung flow ng bawat communication process po natin. Baka pagdating mo doon, ay dala-dala mo pa din yung Pinoy na kultura, yung Pinoy na kultura pala ay iba doon sa kultura ng pinuntahan mong bansa. Baka ma-deport ka or baka pabalikin ka sa Pilipinas. For example, you go to Arab country. Sa Pilipinas kasi, nagbebeso-beso tayo, nagkikiss tayo ng kamay, pagdating doon, dala-dala mo pa din. Bawal pala. Right? Sa Pilipinas kasi, pwedeng magdikit ang babae at lalaki, walang problema. Pagdating sa Arabia, Saudi Arabia, hindi pala pwedeng magdikit yung babae at lalaki. Because based on their culture, it's not good. Okay? So meaning, baka you will be left behind. Or worse, baka pwede kang matanggal sa trabaho or kasi hindi ka nakapag-adapt doon sa kultura ng bansa na pinuntahan mo. That is the very reason why we have purposive communication, because purposive communication or Gned 05 is preparing you to become good communicators interculturally or multiculturally in the future. You also have to accept the fact that you will not be working in the Philippines someday. You will be working abroad. And it is important that you must know and adopt and learn the culture of that country so that you will become successful in the flow, in the communication, in communicating your ideas, in your messages, etc. Okay? Now, culture, kasi yan ang mangyayari sa'yo if you weren't able to adapt one's or other country's culture or even a social group's culture. You will become an outcast. You will become you will be an outcast. You will not be in to a certain group, or worse, you will become just a singular person. Mayroong singularity. Magiging island ka. Okay? Para kang isla na walang kumakausap sa'yo, na walang nag-approach sa'yo kasi ikaw mismo hindi mo na-adapt yung kanilang kultura. And we don't want that to happen. That's why you are studying, because you want to work for the betterment of your family. And one way is that you have to recognize also. You have to recognize, you have to respect, and you have to understand that culture is different. From one person to another, from one country to another, from one cultural background to another. Okay? Now, there are actually 4 barriers to intercultural communication. Actually, sometimes or even most of the times, culture is really a barrier. hindi naman natin inaalis yan na ang kultura ay hadlang sa communication. Kaya nga, as much as possible, we are trying to address these barriers so that we will be able to achieve intercultural communication. And one of the barriers to IC is what we call ethnocentrism. Now, what do we mean by ethnocentrism? Can you read? May I listen to you, Aldea? Loke, can you read what ethnocentrism is? Nakbigyan mo ako tubig.
Ethnocentrism. This refers to the belief of one's own culture is better than others. Ethnocentric attitude is illustrated when people evaluate others based on their own cultural beliefs and practices.
Okay, so ethnocentrism, that means to say that you are imposing that your culture is superior than the others and their culture is inferior than yours. Okay? Ang ethnocentrism, parang sinasabi mo na, ito yung kultura namin ay mas powerful ito na culture kaysa sa culture ninyo. Itong culture namin ito ang superior na culture at yung culture ninyo, yan ang inferior na culture. That is ethnocentrism. Now, actually in social media or even in television or even in newspapers or dailies, we always hear or we always read some Asians or Filipinos, especially in the United States, who are murdered, who were killed, right? Okay, who are verbally assaulted or insulted because of their culture. Okay? Alam natin yan. Minsan, yung isang Pilipino sa US, bumili lang ng pagkain sa isang convenience store, ayaw siyang pagbilhan, ayaw siyang pagbilhan. Okay? Or tatapunan siya ng pagkain. Okay? And worse, just recently, we have this senior citizen, a Filipino senior citizen, who are just walking down the street, and then we have these teenagers, Native Americans, tapos pinalo nila ng kanilang skateboard. Namatay yung isang Pilipino. That is ethnocentrism. It means to say that it seems that you are imposing that Asian culture is inferior and American culture is superior. Okay, that is ethnocentrism. Again, I repeat, no culture is more superior than the others. And no culture is more powerful or is stronger than the other culture. Lahat pantay-pantay in terms of culture. Because that is your standard. Because that is the set standard of the society where you belong. And worse, there actually, and not at all times, culture is negative. Grabe, pinuno mo naman itong ano. Parang wala nang bukas. Isang lito talaga. Okay. So, but not at all times, ethnocentrism naman is negative. There are also times that ethnocentrism is negative. So it says there are 3 levels of ethnocentrism. One, the positive level is when you prefer that your culture over others people's culture. That is the positive. Paano ba ito ini-illustrate? For example, a Filipino, he went abroad. He went to the United States. He embraced, he learned the American culture, but when he goes back to his country, hindi pa rin niya nakakalimutan yung kanyang Pinoy na kultura. That is what we call the positive level of ethnocentrism. Although you already have learned a new culture, but you didn't forget your culture. Okay? Your Filipino culture. That is the positive level. But aside from its positive level, there are 2 negative levels of ethnocentrism. One is that the belief that your culture is more superior than the other culture. That is negative level. If you are imposing that my culture is stronger, my culture is superior, my culture is powerful than yours, that is the negative level of ethnocentrism. And the extremely negative level of ethnocentrism is that imposing on your own cultural belief. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Ikaw, para maging katanggap-tanggap ka, para ikaw ay tanggapin namin sa grupo na to, dapat iwanan mo na yung kultura mo at i-embrace mo itong culture na to. It seems that there is already the power and authority authorizing a person that he or she should embrace your culture and forget his previous culture. That is what we call the extremely negative level of ethnocentrism. Okay? Another barrier is what we call stereotyping. Now, if we say stereotyping is somewhat labeling or branding. Okay, that is stereotyping. Or simply just saying, I cannot trust you because you have a dark skin. I don't want to touch you because you are poor. I don't want to engage in a talk with you because you are a Chinese. I don't want to engage in a talk with you because because you are uneducated. You did not complete your grade 1. I don't want to talk to you. That is stereotyping. Okay? And that is labeling. It means that simply saying that simply saying that a person or a group is basically murderer or killer despite of a selected evidence or just based on your selective observation or your overgeneralization, kaya tayo nakapagbigay ng label. For example, lahat ng, example lang naman ito, Muslims are terrorists. Okay? That is already stereotyping. Remember people that not all, okay? Hindi lahat. Perhaps because even Christians, right? There are also those, for example, you would say, Christians are murderers. Okay? Parang linahat mo na lahat ng Kristiyano ay murderer. Okay? That is not true. Okay? Because that is what we call stereotyping. Or you would say, lahat ng babae ay mahihina because men are stronger than women. That is stereotyping. Okay? So, that is labeling or that is branding. Or you would say, naku, ayaw kong makinig dyan kasi bakla naman yan. Kasi ang bakla, demonyo yan. Ang bakla ay diablo yan. Kaya ayaw kong makinig dyan. Likhayan ni Satanas. Ayan. That is stereotyping. Okay? It seems that we refuse to listen on a person because that person already is labeled by the sender or by the receiver. That is stereotyping and that must be avoided. Okay? So stereotyping, we have negative stereotypes. Okay? So you would say, naku, for example, yung mga badyaw, lagi nating nakikita yan mga badyaw, 'di ba? Umaakyat sa mga jeep, nagbibigay ng mga sobre-sobre, kahit okay naman ang pangangatawan, kahit matikas naman, malakas ang pangangatawan, umaakyat sa mga jeep, 'di ba? Nagbibigay ng
Rugby, sir.
sobre. Ano po?
Pinangrarugby nila, sir.
Naku, ayan, stereotyping ang tawag natin dyan. Pinang-rugby agad. Wala. Yan, ang tawag dyan, Lawrence, is stereotyping. Okay? Hindi naman yan lahat. Okay? Siguro, there are some, pero hindi natin sila nilalahat. Okay? Now, so for example, you would say, naku, yung mga badyaw na yan, ano yan? Beggar, ano yan? Mga tamad yan. Diba? Ayaw na lang nilang magtrabaho. Ayaw na lang nilang humanap ng work. Okay? Kaysa naman mamalimos pa. Napakatamad nila. Ayan. That is what we call stereotyping. You know what, people? Based on the culture of the Badjao people, because I already researched on that, I already asked some Badjao, why are they doing that? Why they prefer to beg food or to beg money, go up and down on jeepneys and buses just to beg money? Because according to the Badjao people, it is better for them to beg rather than to what?
To work.
Not to work, but rather to die in starvation, etc., etc. Okay? So hindi naman sa sila ay tamad, kundi ang kultura kasi nila ay mas maganda na lang yung manghingi, magbeg, kaysa naman sa mamatay sila ng gutom or mamatay ng whatever. Okay? That's why they are doing that. Kaya kahit malalakas ang katawan nila, matitipuno ang mga katawan nila, mga nanay, mga tatay, nagbe-beg sila ng money. Okay? Yan. Kasi nga, mas okay na sa kanila yung mamalimos kaysa yung umasa sa ibang tao. Kaysa umasa pa sa iba. Okay? That is what we call stereotyping. Again, Muslims are terrorists. That is stereotyping. All Asians are not intelligent. Ayan. That is stereotyping. Okay? Ilocanos are kuripot. That is stereotyping. Okay? Huwag nating nilalahat. Oh. Next. Next to stereotyping, another barrier is what we call prejudice. Ito naman yung prejudice, meaning we are making judgment or we are making conclusion out of few instances or out of selective observation or sometimes even our overgeneralization. That is prejudice. Meaning, nagbibigay na tayo ng judgment, nagbibigay na tayo ng conclusion na hindi pa natin nakakausap yung tao, na hindi pa natin nakikilala yung tao, na hindi pa natin auto-judgment. Yeah, that's prejudice. Okay? For example, you would say, naku, ayaw kong kausapin yan. Kasi, tinan mo yung skin niya, maitim. Ayaw kong kausapin yan kasi mahirap naman yan. Ayaw kong kausapin yan dahil bakla yan. Ayaw kong kausapin yan dahil, Rizalista yan. Ayaw kong kausapin yan dahil magkaiba kami ng religion. That is prejudice. Okay? You are already making your judgment out of very few instances or sometimes yan ang prejudice. Making judgment out of few instances. Pero ang stereotyping, that is making judgment out of exaggeration or over generalization. That is stereotyping. Yan ang pinagkaiba nila. Stereotyping, kapag nagbibigay ka ng judgment na over or exaggerated, that is stereotyping. But if you are making a judgment out of few instances, ang tawag naman doon, prejudice. Now, if you combine ethnocentrism, stereotyping, and prejudice, it results into an extremely negative barrier of communication, and we call that one as discrimination. Okay? And this is a very popular issue nowadays, discrimination, that is being encountered not only by Filipinos, but even Asians. Okay? Who are actually living in other countries. Naintindihan natin ito, na-experience nila ito. Remember that discrimination is an extremely negative behavior caused by prejudice or stereotyping, and it may be in the form of verbal insults, violence, avoidance of a person, and genocide. So meaning to say, kahit pala wala kang sinasabi, pero kapag ina-avoid mo yung isang tao na kausapin dahil maitim siya, dahil mahirap siya, dahil iba yung religion niya sa'yo, that is already a form of discrimination. And worse, making verbal insult on that person. Ayaw kitang kausap, maitim ka. That is verbal insult. Remember, people, that our language and our non-verbal actions tell messages. They tell a message and they do have interpretation. So, pag iniiwasan natin yung tao, ayaw kong kausap yan, ayaw kong katabi yan sa jeep dahil dahil iba yung kanyang religion. Ayaw ko siyang kausapin dahil iba yung binoto niya ng eleksyon. That is discrimination already. Ayaw ko siyang kausapin dahil iba naman yung religion niya dito sa religion ko. That is discrimination already. Avoidance. And worse, discrimination may also be in the form of physical violence. Or it could be result in murder or even in killing of a person. Okay? Now, ito ngayon ang gusto nating ma-achieve. Ito yung tinatawag nating ICC o yung tinatawag nating Intercultural Communication Competence. That is what we need at present. And that is the type of communicative competence that every individual must develop. If we say ICC, it is our ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in various cultural contexts. Meaning to say, we must be we are ICC, or we are communicatively competent if you can communicate with other people without judgment. Okay? If you can communicate with other people despite the differences in culture. If you can communicate with other people by recognizing, respecting, understanding their culture. If communication is still possible despite those differences, despite those diversities, then you have that ICC, or you have that intercultural communication competence. So meaning, kapag ikaw ay nakakapag-communicate pa rin sa ibang tao, kahit iba yung kanyang pananaw, iba yung kanyang relihiyon, iba yung kanyang gender, iba yung kanyang tradisyon, iba yung kanyang paniniwala, then you possess that ICC, or that intercultural communication competence. As I have said earlier, this is the type of communication competence that you should develop. Because in the future, uulitin ko, in the future, of course, you want a better or a greener pasture for your families, right? You are also dreaming to work abroad. You're also dreaming to go to America, okay, the land of honey. You want to go to Saudi Arabia or other parts of the world to become computer analysts, scientists, programmers, experts, or whatever. It is important that you must be communicatively competent, or ICC, despite the fact that there are differences in culture. Kasi mapag-iiwanan ka kapag ikaw yung tao na hindi marunong mag-adapt at matuto doon sa kultura ng ibang tao, sa kultura ng ibang bansa. Okay? You must be able to adapt it and learn from those culture so that you will become competent in terms of intercultural communication. Okay? And lastly, to end the discussion, according to Mahatma Gandhi, she says, no culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive. What do you understand about this statement of Gandhi? Or what do you understand about this statement of Gandhi? That no culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive. May I hear from you, Jerlyn?
We said earlier, sir, that 'di ba na culture intercultural communication must be shared with other people. So kung if the culture attempts to be exclusive, then hindi siya mabubuhay and walang continuous change. Yun lang po.
Okay, very good. May we have Zachary?
It's not a culture if there's only it's not a culture if it's only one person. For it to be a culture, it needs to be many people.
Okay. Last one. May we have Loke?
Sir, yung ano po, no culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive po. If wala pong standing sa culture and hindi po sila nagtatry ng iba't ibang culture, ay hindi po sila, sa panahon po ngayon, ay hindi po sila magsusurvive.
Okay, sige. Idioma.
Siguro po para sa akin yung based on my understanding in the quote of Mahatma Gandhi, we need to evolve our culture because kasi hindi naman tayo mag-stick sa mga nakasanayan natin dati. Siyempre, throughout the generation, nagbabago talaga. Sabi nga, change is constant talaga. Change is constant. Sa kahit anong aspeto, kahit mapaya culture man yan, siyempre, yung pag-iwala natin ng culture, siyempre magagamit din yan sa mga bagong generation. Di man po sir.
Okay, amen. Next, Dasalia.
I think po culture divides us, but we should celebrate each other in order to have an effective communication instead of stereotyping po and prejudice po. Society po has progressed past the need for judging each other po, and rather than celebrating po.
Okay. So basically, Mahatma Gandhi is just simply saying us that culture is meant to be shared. Okay? We have to share our culture to other people so that other people would also understand us, so that other people would learn from our culture, and eventually, well, they will be able to respect, they will be able to recognize, and will be able to uh, achieve peace, unity, cultural communication, or whatever. Because if that culture is meant to be closed, not open to everybody, then that culture will never be understood. Hindi nila maunawaan yung kultura natin or yung kultura mo kapag exclusive lamang yan na para sa'yo. Dapat you have to share it. You have to share it, you have to engage it, you have to make people understand it so that they would also learn our culture. Remember, people, that you do not make yourself a cemetery of your culture. Huwag mong gawin ng sarili mo na sementeryo ng sarili mong kultura. Kasi ang kultura, para maging buhay, kailangan natin itong i-share. Kasi pag hindi natin ito na-share, hindi nito nag-change, hindi ito nagbago, hindi ito naging dynamic, mapapatay ang kultura na yan. And basically, pagpatay na yung kultura na yan, magbabanish na yan, at hindi na yan magiging part ng society. And remember, people, that we are living in a multilingual world. We are living in a multicultural world. And it is important that we have to communicate despite the so many differences, because we should, sabi nga kanina, I would want to copy the word or to borrow the word celebrate. We have to celebrate our uniqueness. We have to celebrate our differences, because through our differences, that is what make an individual, or that's what make a person unique in his own way and his own rights. Okay? So, question. None so far. O, ako na sumagot. Question? None. Okay. Hoy, may tanong? Magtanong kayo kung meron kayong tatanong. Okay. Now, parang Miss Universe ang ating mga sagutan ngayong hapon na to. Now, as I have said, you will have your quiz, short quiz today. It's just a 15-item quiz as regards the nature of communication. So after I ended the link, you can now start your quiz. Okay? So para naka-restrict pa siya, titingnan ko muna, then I will send it in the group chat if hindi na siya restricted. If there will be no more questions, then perhaps let us call it a day and see you again next week. Goodbye and have a nice afternoon and enjoy the rest of the Tuesday. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye po.
Thank
Bye,
you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,